What started as an ordinary day in Atlanta's buzzing reality TV universe suddenly erupted into a situation so shocking that even longtime viewers, cast members, and producers were left speechless. Unable to fully process how quickly everything spiraled out of control, the morning began with the usual blend of glamorous social media posts, behind-the-scenes whispers, and cast members pretending everything was calm. But beneath that polished surface, tension crackled with an intensity no one had yet recognized. It wasn't until a single message, short, blunt, and impossible to ignore, flashed across two phones at nearly the same time that the atmosphere shifted from routine drama to a full-blown emotional explosion that no one could contain. Within minutes, private group chats lit up. Notifications poured in without stopping, and the cast realized they weren't dealing with rumors or speculation anymore. They were confronting a confrontation so raw, personal, and deeply rooted that it threatened to unravel years of fragile peace. Even crew members used to handling meltdowns were stunned by how fast the conflict escalated, as if someone had ripped the top off a pressure cooker and released everything at once. And at the center of the chaos stood two people who had been avoiding this moment for far too long, now forced to face a secret that refused to stay hidden any longer. A secret that threatened reputations, relationships, and the entire season's storyline in one explosive sweep. For years, the relationships within this tangled circle of couples operated like a delicate balancing act, where each person carried hidden frustrations, unspoken regrets, and emotional wounds that never fully healed even when they pretended to move forward. Kirk and Rashida had built their brand on resilience and longevity, but beneath their polished image lived a history of complicated mistakes, uncomfortable reconciliations, and the kind of lingering doubts that can quietly suffocate a marriage from the inside. Erica, meanwhile, remained an unshakable presence in their story, representing a chapter Kirk tried to close but never truly succeeded in burying, especially because their past occasionally resurfaced in ways neither party could fully control. On the other side of the story stood Mendes and Yandi, a couple whose loyalty to each other had always been their strongest defense. Yet privately, the two wrestled with unresolved issues, shifting trust and a pressure-filled environment that made every small disagreement feel much bigger than it actually was. The emotional weight carried by all four individuals created a fragile ecosystem where one wrong move, one misinterpreted message, or one resurfaced mistake could send everything crashing down without warning. Over time, all these buried tensions blended into a simmering undercurrent, forming a volatile emotional backdrop that was waiting for the right spark to detonate. And when that spark finally appeared, triggered by a message no one expected, it didn't just reopen old wounds. It exposed how deeply these relationships were intertwined and how much pain had been sitting in silence, waiting for a moment to erupt into the spotlight. Under the days leading up to the eruption, Kirk had been unusually quiet, carrying himself with a stiff, distracted energy that even Rashida sensed but couldn't quite decode, unaware that he had already begun piecing together fragments of conversations, subtle behavior shifts, and offhand comments that didn't sit right with him. Though he tried to stay composed, an unsettling combination of guilt, intuition, and unresolved memories pushed him into a private investigation he hoped would prove his concerns wrong, not right. Instead of confronting anyone directly, he turned inward, replaying past mistakes he wished he could erase, and quietly analyzing every interaction connected to the sudden tension swirling around Mendes and Erica. He checked timestamps, reviewed messages, and even revisited old conversations he once tried to forget, hoping to find reassurance, but discovering only more questions. Each new detail added to his unease, reminding him how fragile relationships can become when too many secrets pile up between people who are supposed to trust one another. Despite trying to proceed cautiously, find himself caught between wanting to protect his own family and recognizing how deeply this situation threatened to spill beyond his control. And as he moved deeper into his quiet investigation, it became clear that whatever was happening wasn't just a misunderstanding or a moment of emotional confusion. It was part of a chain reaction powerful enough to drag everyone into a confrontation none of them were prepared to face, especially him. It all began with quiet whispers drifting through. Erica's bar whispers that were never meant to leave the dimly lit corners of the lounge, but somehow grew louder with every passing night. Regulars noticed the same familiar face slipping in after hours, staying just long enough to spark suspicion, but leaving quickly enough to avoid direct attention. Employees who usually minded their own business couldn't help but exchange glances as they watched a pattern forming right in front of them. The same discreet conversations, the same nervous body language, and the same rushed exits that hinted something deeper was brewing. At first, everyone chalked it up to coincidence, maybe even harmless socializing, until one evening when a friend of the family paused mid-sip, narrowed their eyes, and realized they had seen this exact scenario play out before a scandal erupted years back. The atmosphere shifted instantly. People who once shrugged off the sightings started leaning in, listening harder, watching more closely. It wasn't long before the unspoken rule of mind your business fell apart, replaced by a growing sense of curiosity mixed with unease. Every time the door opened, every time a shadow moved near the back booths, someone was paying attention. And the more people watched, the harder it became to deny that something far more complex, far more dangerous, was unfolding. The whispers weren't just rumors anymore, they were the earliest red flags of a story about to explode by the time the tension from Erica's bar reached Frost Bistro. It was no longer just speculation, it was a storm waiting to break. And everyone in the room felt the pressure shift the moment the two finally stood face to face. The restaurant, usually buzzing with weekend energy, suddenly fell into an uneasy silence as staff exchanged cautious glances and customers leaned in without even realizing it. Kirk walked in with a seriousness that instantly changed the tone of the place. His shoulders tense, his expression locked somewhere between confusion and anger, and every step signaling he was done entertaining half-truths and vague explanations. Erica, caught off guard but refusing to show it, met him with a calm exterior that only intensified the moment. Their voices stayed low at first, almost too controlled, as if both were trying desperately not to let the situation erupt in public. But every word carried the crackling electricity of unresolved accusations. The air thickened with tension, and even the sound of dishes clinking in the back felt amplified. When the conversation shifted from general questions to pointed allegations, the atmosphere snapped. Sparks flew, instantly sharp words, defensive tones, and emotions that had clearly been building for far longer than either wanted to admit. Customers pretended not to listen, but every ear in the place was tuned in, waiting for the next line, the next reveal, the next break in composure. It wasn't a shouting match, but the intensity was louder than any argument could have been, exposing the fracture lines in real time. And in that single heated encounter, everyone in Frost Bistro realized this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was the beginning of something huge, messy, and impossible to hide any longer. Within hours of the confrontation, what had been private suspicion transformed into undeniable evidence when screenshots, DMs, and time-stamped receipts surfaced, each one more shocking than the last. It began with a few leaked images that spread quietly, almost cautiously, through a small circle. But as more pieces appeared, the puzzle snapped together in a way that left absolutely no room for interpretation. The screenshots weren't vague or easily dismissed. They showed clear conversations, unmistakable usernames, and messages that revealed a connection far deeper than anyone expected. Then came the timestamps, painfully specific, matching the exact nights people had spotted the same familiar face at Erica's bar, the same evenings Kirk had claimed to be elsewhere, and the same moments when tension had mysteriously spiked. Every receipt told its own story, painting a picture of late-night meets, overlapping schedules, and communication patterns that no one could explain away. As the evidence circulated, shock quickly turned into disbelief. And disbelief turned into outrage as more people realized how long this had been building in the shadows. Friends who once defended the situation grew quiet, and those who suspected the truth finally had the proof they had been waiting for. The digital trail was too detailed, too consistent, too incriminating to ignore messages that aligned perfectly with sightings. Receipts that complemented the whispers and screenshots that exposed conversations meant to stay hidden forever. By the time everything went public, the narrative had already shifted from rumor to revelation, and there was no going back. The receipts didn't just reveal the truth, they shattered it wide open for everyone to see. Wide open for everyone to see. The moment Erica finally opened her mouth, the entire room seemed to pause. As if every moving part inside Frost Bistro came to a grinding halt. Up until that point, tension had been building in Layer's quiet suspicions. Sharp glances, half-finished sentences, but nothing compared to the impact of a line she was about to drop. Kirk stood there waiting, bracing himself for denial or excuses, but Erica didn't choose either. Instead, she delivered a single, pointed sentence that sliced through the air like a blade. A sentence that suggested she knew far more than she had ever admitted. And that Kirk's version of events wasn't the whole story. The instant those words left her mouth, the energy in the room detonated. Customers froze mid-bite, staff stared in disbelief, and even the background music felt like it faded into silence. The weight of her statement hit Kirk harder than he expected, knocking the certainty out of him and replacing it with a cold shock that mirrored the collective reaction around them. Erica's tone wasn't defensive, and it wasn't apologetic, it was confident. Almost resigned, as if she had accepted the fallout long before this moment even arrived. That confidence sparked an emotional implosion in Kirk. His expression shifting from anger to confusion and straight into disbelief as he tried to process what she had just revealed. The room vibrated with tension, whispers breaking out in corners, phones sliding discreetly out of pockets. And every witness silently acknowledging that they had just seen the moment everything flipped. It wasn't the shouting or the confrontation that lit the fusette, was Erica's single, undeniable line. A line that exposed cracks Kirk didn't want to acknowledge and forced the entire situation into a new, dangerous territory. While the confrontation played out in real time, what most people didn't realize was that behind the scenes, producers were already shaping the direction of the narrative, strategizing how every detail could unfold on screen with maximum impact. Kirk, torn between protecting his family and clearing his name, found himself at a crossroads where silence felt like guilt and honesty felt like a setup. Producers pushed for clarity, for confession, for transparency, but more importantly, they pushed for a storyline that would keep the audience glued to every new episode. Kirk knew that if he didn't take control, someone else would twist the narrative, leak selective clips, or create an angle that made him look even worse. That pressure, combined with the mounting evidence circulating around him, forced his hand. Going public wasn't about seeking sympathy. It was about reclaiming control before the situation spiraled beyond anything he could manage. He needed the world to hear his version directly from him, not chopped into sound bites or manipulated for drama. In the end, it wasn't ego that pushed him forward. It was survival in a world where silence is the fastest route to destruction. Just when it seemed this situation couldn't escalate any further, everything shifted again with the sudden appearance of a voice memo, an unexpected recording that poured gasoline on an already blazing fire. The memo captured a private conversation filled with tension, laugh please, and unfinished truths. And once Kirk heard it, something inside him snapped. His tone changed, his posture stiffened, and the atmosphere thickened into something volatile and unpredictable. The voice memo wasn't just evidence. It was emotional provocation, the kind that makes tempers flare and logic disappear. Erica tried to explain, but the explanation only intensified the moment as Kirk stepped closer, his frustration boiling over in real time. Staff members exchanged panicked looks, unsure whether to intervene or keep their distance as the argument sharpened into something raw, more personal. The back and forth grew louder despite both trying to keep control. And it wasn't long before emotions overpowered restraint, when Erica reached out in an attempt to block Kirk's advance. The movement collided with his own frustrated gesture, resulting in a sudden physical shove that made every witness gasp. It wasn't premeditated aggression. It was the kind of accidental escalation that happens when two people are pushed far beyond their emotional limits. but the impact was undeniable. The shove echoed through the room, shifting the energy from heated confrontation to full-blown crisis. Phones shot up instantly. People whispering, recording, reacting. And within seconds, the entire space transformed into a chaotic swirl of shock and disbelief. Kirk froze, realizing what had just happened, while Erica's eyes widened not with fear, but with the painful recognition that the situation had crossed a line neither of them could take back. In that single explosive moment, the narrative changed forever, setting the stage for fallout that no apology or explanation would be able to contain. The next morning felt heavier than anyone anticipated, as if the entire city woke up holding its breath, waiting for the next chapter to unfold. Frost Bistro was still buzzing with leftover energy from the night before. Staff replaying every detail, customers revisiting the moment the shove happened, and producers scrambling to figure out how to control the narrative before it spiraled beyond repair. But the real shock came when Yandi walked in unannounced, her presence instantly slicing through the tension like a blade. She wasn't yelling, she wasn't crying, she was composed, focused, and moving with the kind of controlled intensity that makes everyone in the room step back. The collision happened the moment she locked eyes with Kirk, who looked like he hadn't slept in days. His guilt and exhaustion written across his entire posture. Erica, standing to the side, froze as Yandi's expression shifted from confusion to realization, then straight into a calm, chilling disbelief. The atmosphere swelled with pressure as Yandi demanded answers, not with theatrics, but with razor-sharp questions that made it impossible for Kirk to hide behind half-truths or producer-directed explanations. Her voice never cracked. Instead, it carried a level of disappointment that hit harder than any argument. People watching from corners exchanged glances, knowing this confrontation was the one everyone had been waiting for, the moment when the fallout became real, personal, and impossible to contain. As the conversation unfolded, it became clear that nothing about this situation could be patched up quietly. Yandi's arrival didn't just escalate the drama, it marked the point where everything shifted from speculation to irreversible consequences. Within minutes of the first leaked clip hitting the internet, social media exploded into a frenzy that no one could control. Hashtags shot into trending lists, fan pages dissected every frame, and long threads formed debating who was lying, who was manipulating, and who was finally being exposed. People took sides instantly, flooding timelines with opinions, outrage, and theories that grew louder by the hour. Influencers jumped in to capitalize on the moment. Reaction channels posted breakdowns, and even former cast members resurfaced to throw in cryptic comments. The public wasn't just watching, they were participating, fueling the chaos with reposts, edits, and voiceovers until the entire scandal felt larger than the people involved. By the time producers demanded an emergency meeting, the scandal had already reached a point where damage control felt nearly impossible. Cast members were pulled into a conference room with blinds drawn, phones collected at the door, and security stationed outside to prevent leaks. Everyone sat in tense silence as the lead producer placed a phone on the table, cleared her throat, and pressed play on the full audio recording that had been causing waves behind the scenes. The room stiffened instantly. Every voice, every pause, every emotional crack in the memo played out in brutal clarity, exposing context that none of them had heard before. It wasn't just a recording, it was a timeline, a confession, and a raw unraveling of everything that led to the confrontation. Kirk shifted uncomfortably. Erica stared at her hands, and Yandi listened with an expression so unreadable that no one dared turn in her direction. The producers exchanged looks that spoke louder than words, recognizing the explosive potential this audio had for the show, but also the irreversible damage it confirmed. When the memo ended, the silence that followed was suffocating. No excuses, no explanations, just the weight of truth hanging between everyone in the room. The producers finally broke the tension, outlining the legal risks, the narrative consequences, and the immediate steps needed to manage the fallout. But even as they spoke, one thing became painfully clear. The audio didn't just complicate the storyline, it completely rewrote it. When the final seconds of the recording faded into silence, all eyes shifted to Yandi, who hadn't moved a muscle since the audio began. Her stillness carried a gravity that filled the entire room. And even the producers, usually unfazed by chaos, seemed unsure of what she would do next. She slowly exhaled, not in anger, but in a deep, exhausted realization that everything she needed to know had finally been laid out in front of her with brutal clarity. There was no yelling, no dramatic accusations, no scene for cameras to exploit. Instead, Yandi stood up calmly, collected her things, and delivered a quiet but decisive sentence that made everyone freeze. She was done participating in anything that required her to justify pain she never asked for. The room remained completely silent as she pushed her chair back, walked to the door, and stepped out without another word. Producers exchanged frantic glances. Kirk's face drained of color. And Erica looked stunned as the consequences of the recording settled in. Yandi's walkout wasn't loud, but it was final, marking the point where the situation shifted from scandal to something far more real. As the episode closes, the tension doesn't fade, it tightens, leaving viewers with burning questions that only deepen the mystery. What will Yandi's do now that she's walked away? How will Kirk respond once the full truth reaches the public? Will Erica finally reveal the missing pieces she's been avoiding? Or is there still more hiding beneath the surface? The fallout is far from over, and the next steps promise to reshape every relationship caught in this storm. Viewers are left suspended in uncertainty, replaying every moment and searching for clues that might hint at what comes next. And now the question turns to you. Whose story do you believe? And what truth do you think has yet to surface? Drop your thoughts, theories, and predictions in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss the next explosive chapter.